and welcome everyone. Uh, Thank you for joining us today in this UNU Generative AI series webinar edition. This webinar series features distinguished scholars and researchers from the UNU system and an extensive network in academia and the broader field to deliver presentations and discussions on topics related to generative AI. This series presents diverse perspectives on how generative AI will impact our collective future. Today, our distinguished speakers will highlight how the rapid advancements of generative AI is transforming diplomatic processes and what this means for the future of global diplomacy in international relations. Today's webinar is co-organized by the United Nations University Institute in Macau and the Institute for International Strategy and Information Analysis. In short, we can call it IISIA, which is based in Japan. Today, we are honored to be joined by speakers, Mr. Takeo Harada, Dr. Munira Bano, and Dr. Corneli Bijola, who have extensive expertise in diplomas and AI. Once again, I welcome you, and we are thrilled to have you here for our webinar. We appreciate your participation and look forward to an engaging, informative session. May I now welcome Mr. Takeo Harada, the CEO of the Institute for International Strategy and Information Analysis, for the short remarks. Mr. Harada, the floor is yours. Please welcome.
Hello, my name is Takeo Harada, a CEO and a representative of the IISIA located in Tokyo, Japan. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this webinar entitled Generative AI and Diplomacy, What's Beyond? It is really a great honor for me and our institute, IISIA, as well, to co-host this webinar. And I have personally the impression that there are so many researchers who are researching diplomacy in general, while so many researchers researching the generative AI. But the issue, the combination between diplomacy and generative AI, when we pick up this issue, I think the number of the researchers dedicated to this issue is relatively low. So I think today's webinar will make a great contribution to the missing link in the academia. And please enjoy today's webinar for making the better future with all the panelists, esteemed panelists, and also other colleagues from all over the world. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Arada, for the wonderful opening remarks. And now, may I introduce our first speaker. But before I introduce the first speaker, please feel free to introduce yourself on WeChat, and you may reserve your questions, because we'll have a short session for discussion at the end of the webinar. We'll have a chance to pose your questions, and our speakers will be very happy to respond to your questions. But otherwise, you can also post your question on the Q&A session. Now, may I introduce our very first speaker, Dr. Munira Bano. Dr. Munira Bano is a senior research scientist at Australia's National Science Agency, CSIRO, specifically within its digital arm, Data61. She holds a PhD in software engineering from the University of Technology, Sydney. Her research interests are focused on human-centered design, ethical and responsible AI, and the promotion of diversity and inclusion in AI. Dr. Bano is recognized for her leadership in STEM diversity initiatives and has received multiple accolades for her contributions to the field, including the title of Most Influential Asian Australian Under 40 in 2019. May I now welcome Dr. Bano for her presentation. The floor is yours, Dr. Bano.
Thank you so much. Let me see if I can share my screen. Can you all hear me fine?
Yeah, the screen is coming. Okay.
Hey, greetings from Melbourne, and I hope you're all having a good day wherever you're joining from around the world. And thank you to the organizers of this session for giving me opportunity to share some of the work that we are doing here in Australia's National Science Agency, CSIRO. And this particular one that I will, before going into the depth of how we got into the diplomacy, I will give an overview of where I am coming from and what work that I am trying to integrate into the diplomacy as well. So as in the introduction, Ali has said that I am from CSIRO's Digital Arm Data 61, and more specifically, I am working on a project that's responsible and ethical AI, where two of the main streams are, one is that diversity inclusion in AI, and then the generative AI and its social impact in various fields. And one of them will be the project of diplomacy that I will be discussing. So to give you a bit of context very quickly, that what we mean by diversity inclusion is that we intentionally a proactive approach of inclusion of humans with diverse attributes and the perspective in data process system and governance of the AI ecosystem. And these definitions, I think quite intuitively, we know what diversity means, what the attributes would mean. But this process of inclusion that I'm talking about is that AI is a very broad term, an umbrella term, and there are different types of AI systems which are designed for different kind of uh, actions. Facial recognition systems, when employed in different scenarios, would do different tasks. So they are designed for a very specific purpose. What kind of attributes? Who are these people? This social interaction, when it's interacting with people, what would take precedence? That's where our research focus is. And this ecosystem, just like the diagram here shows, that we have 5 components in it. They all have to have a very clear balance in any AI system where you're doing it. So coming from a software engineering background and moving into the social technical side, the human and governance, these two, we try to keep it on top of these other data processing system layers of this ecosystem. And to give briefly idea that what we have already, we have tried our diversity inclusion principles in job recruitments with Seek, Australian Broadcasting Company. We have collaboration for the media contents in the real time, and also we are looking into sports. So these are different scenarios where, other than diplomacy, we have been looking previously. So now coming to the generative AI, very briefly, it's algorithm that can generate new data based on the data they are already trained on. So the whole nature of this generative AI that makes it very specific is that it needs a huge data set to get trained and then create a new data, which would resemble in whatever shape or form it is to the human generated data. And it could be text, it could be image, it could be the computer software code, and other like voice or video, the recent innovations that we are seeing in generative AI. So, and another dimension is that what the problem we are looking from diversity inclusion in generative AI in any domain, whether it's diplomacy or sports or health insurance, this synthetic data, because these generative AI, they create these contents. And how do we look at the hyperfake, the deepfake, the misinformation? So there are a lot of problems that generative AI's model, they already have. So before deploying these generative AI solution in any social context, we have to be very aware of what kind of challenges this solution comes with. And because every field is different, diplomacy would be different than how you are incorporating generative AI in health, insurance, or education. So awareness kind of informs you how you can use this solution in any social context. So I will give one very short example before moving to the exact project, that what diversity inclusion problem would look like. So quite a number of people I think know, but those who don't know, these large language models specifically and these generative AI, they are trained on the data set that was publicly available contents over the cyberspace or internet. And this is the model. That's how these are created. So if the world population is roughly 8 billion, so we can see that half of the world population do not have the access to internet. So the access to technology is the first level of exclusion, that there is no representation of those people. They don't contribute to the data set. Then once again, who are the people who actually contribute? There is content creators who are in minority. This is the representation problem. Then dominant is the global north who contributes to the data for generative AI. And English is the dominant language, and within that language, there's not much of the useful content. So you can see that there is an exclusion on every level of generative AI. So AI or generative AI, they have problems of biases, hallucination, limitations of their own in terms of ethical considerations. Now we use them in field of diplomacy or any other social context. So we have to know what kind of opportunities are there, but what challenges are already there. Whether they are the challenges that comes from the very nature of AI, how the algorithms are designed, or what kind of problems were there in the data, or that the field of diplomacy already had some challenges and incorporating AI might, instead of solving, exacerbate. So to understand that, first we what I'm going to present here is based on one of the studies that we took, which is a review of the literature. There was not any empirical evidence available in the published literature about use of generative AI so far when we were doing as of October 2023. So what we did was that the first step was to look at the literature in digital and AI diplomacy, try to extract the challenges and opportunities that we could see from the resulting 231 unique studies on the topic. And then based on our previous knowledge of generative AI and AI, we tried to foresee that what kind of future trends will be there and what kind of ethical and responsible AI considerations will be needed before they are actually being used in diplomatic practices. So this idea came from, I was the lead researcher. I have two other team members. One of them Ambassador Zahid Hafiz Chaudhry, who's the High Commissioner of Pakistan to Australia. And he was quite keen in finding out what kind of opportunities are there. But me and the third author, Professor Didar Zohri, coming from the technical background and also being researchers in responsible AI and ethical AI, we wanted to also foresee that what kind of awareness and literacy is needed around the cautious use of these solutions when it comes to sensitive areas of diplomacy. So this is just to give a sum up of what the literature we were able to find based on digital and AI diplomacy. Just like I said, that Gen AI was not there, but you can see that there is increased in the literature around the time when we see more of these AI solution and Gen AI solution, and there is a spike after 2020, and especially around the time when ChatGPT was also launched as well. So we see that in recent years, there's more interest in this topic. Either this is about the academic literature. In practice, how these adoptions are taking places that may or may not be different than the theoretical map that we have here. So what we were able to see, that we extract the areas where we could see the potential for where Gen AI can contribute based on our knowledge. That's potential areas that we foresee. So it could be, as it is about the content generation, it could do anything that needs text or figures or simulation. So those kind of areas you can see in different, like in health diplomacy, it can do the predictive analysis and it can create the data-driven policy decisions. So there were quite a number of areas that we were able to see highlight. So once again, these are the Gen AI contributions are not coming from the literature, but we found the alignment of what AI has already been used in these areas and how we can foresee in future where the Gen AI will be able to contribute. But along with all these areas is that we were able to find, we were also interested to see what kind of problems will be there. So all this, we collected all this information, but this again, we wanted to see that in these areas, there were quite a number of existing challenges that were mentioned. So how would we foresee these challenges of and risk of integrating AI? And some of them are from AI, some of them are from the area. So 4 major abstract level themes emerged in all of them. And the first and the foremost, the data sovereignty, ownership of the data. That is the most important one, because in quite a number of situations using third-party solutions, or if you don't own the data, there could be a lot of risk to a lot of diplomatic practices that can happen. Misinformation challenge in our other socio-technical research as well, the deepfakes and biases, the misrepresentation of data. This is another one of the major challenge that in Gen AI, it's quite exacerbated. Ethical and cultural challenges were already present in quite a lot of these existing literature, as well as the existing solution of GenAI. And then we see operational and strategic challenges as well. One of them that quite is prominent is the inequitable access to AI. So how would the power balance will change with the, who gets the competitive advantage of these in the diplomatic practices. So we tried to come up with a framework of providing an ethical compliance and oversight, which not only includes the AI diversity inclusion principles that we have already researched and designed, but AI governance, which is a contextual cultural thing that it could be on organizational level or it could be on the national level, how the rules and regulations around what uses would be feasible or allowed, along with the ethics, that how the ethics would be defined within a certain cultural aspects. And then there is the AI and Sustainable Development Goals, which comes from the United Nations. So within different areas that we could identify what opportunities, you can see that there are various areas and there are various opportunities, but that ethical compliance oversight has to remain there if we do not want to go for the wrong side of AI. So that's pretty much kind of summarize the overall vision that we have, and we want to explore this a bit more. So here are some of the references from the work that what I present on the different concepts here, and I have highlighted the paper about which is available on arXiv if somebody wants to look at the details of all the references and the work here. Thank you so much, and I look forward to any questions and comments.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bano, for the insightful presentation. And I hope you'll be with us to the end of the webinar so that we can respond to the questions from our esteemed participants. And as I've said earlier, you may please feel free to post your questions on the Q&A section. Now, may I welcome our second speaker, Dr. Corneli Bijola, who is going to also deliver the talk about the ChatGPT, the end of diplomacy as we knew it. Dr. Corneli is an associate professor of diplomatic studies at the University of Oxford and the head of the Oxford Digital Diplomacy Research Group. He is also a faculty fellow at the Center on Public Diplomacy at the University of Southern California and a professorial lecturer at the Diplomatic Academy of Vienna. His research focuses on the impact of digital technology on the conduct of diplomacy, with a special interest in public diplomacy, international negotiations, and methods countering digital propaganda. The floor is yours, Dr. Corneli.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction, Mr. Neyamai. And also, I'd like to thank the University of Macau and the Institute for International Strategy, Information Analysis of Japan for organizing the event and for inviting me to speak today. I'd like to follow up very comprehensive, insightful presentation of Dr. Mano. And what I plan to do, building on what was said before, is to zoom in on certain aspects and to try to understand a little bit what does it mean for the conduct of diplomacy. I put here a more provocative, and I'm going to explain why shortly, put here a more provocative title, whether AI is going to put an end to diplomacy as we know it. Let's try to understand why do I think that probably could be one outcome. First of all, when we talk everything as Dr. Mano presented, there was a spike in publications, especially after the pandemic, and of course, the arrival of ChatGPT. So when we talk about ChatGPT, of course, we talk about a sub-branch of artificial intelligence which uses machine learning algorithms to predict probabilities of labels given observation. That's the technical definition. What does it mean? It means that it predicts, simply put, words. Words, in a sense, based on, as we see in the image on the right side, what happens is that you have a large database with text mainly, but now as we see, we have also images and sounds. It's becoming ChatGPT is becoming multimodal, but initially it was based on text. So this text then, is combined with algorithms. And the moment you introduce a query, then it's trying to predict the most likely occurrences in a sentence following based on that type of data. And why do I insist on this? Because then, you want to understand a little bit to what extent this is intelligence, as, the common understanding of intelligence refers to. But probably we are at the beginning. What is important is that it has taken the world by storm. It has reached a number of, a large number of users in a very short period of time. Just for comparison, for instance, reaching 100 million milestone for Facebook, it took about 3-4 years. Well, ChatGPT got it, in a couple of months. And that speaks well about, the interest, but also the applicability of this. Why are people interested? Is because it can do certain things and is expected to do certain things better than us. By 2024, for instance, some of the studies, published recently speaks about the fact that it can do better than 25% of humans in certain type of areas. As Dr. Manu mentioned, we have to be aware of the fact that this is not foolproof. Still, it has improved comparing with 2022, but it's still producing sometimes, nonsensical hallucinations. There is a reason why it does so, but now the type of tools that we have from OpenAI or Copilot or Gemini, they're trying to reduce that type of and to improve accuracy. But that's a little bit about the background. Why do I think might be lead to an end of diplomacy? This is a picture of Lord Palmerston. He was the Prime Minister of UK or Minister of Foreign Affairs. But he's famous for one thing, saying that when he received the first telegram in around 1860, he thought that this is the end of diplomacy as we know it. What we know actually is that the telegraph has come and gone, but diplomacy is still there. So to what extent AI actually could change this dynamic? So identify again certain areas in which I think this might be interesting to see a transformation. I'm going to explore a little bit more that shortly. So one thing I think it's the role of automation. What automation means in this case is that, certain tasks that are very redundant, that they very time consuming, could be taken over. Whether we talk about consular affairs in a sense, or maybe, you can think more about everything related to generating text. Of course, there is always a question to what extent you can trust the machine to produce certain things. But I've tested in various cases what may happen. And the results are not necessarily bad. And we are just the beginning. A second area which I actually tested with different tools is the question of crisis management. In terms of simulations, training, in which we can ask for different situations and ChatGPT to respond very accurately depending on how you do the prompt engineering, that is the coding, the programming of ChatGPT, and how you do this in a way that actually can give you better results. Another way in which you can think of using AI, it's also in the questions in the sense of that was highlighted before, of trying to capture a lot of data and do some analysis of that. I have a little paper that I can share with you here. It's used more AI. I was trying to see to what extent I can do that with ChatGPT as well. And that has to do with crisis management. I'm going to share that in the chat room for those interested in the topic. It applies to crisis management in the case of the war in Ukraine. A fourth one, it's about the question of disinformation. And of course, this is a big thing. And I think it's ChatGPT is playing on both sides. It could actually do help with certain things, but it can also make the issue of disinformation even worse because of its capacity to produce a lot of text. At the moment, algorithms try to block the misuse or abuse of the tool, for this information, but I think it's just a matter of time until various actors will figure out how to weaponize ChatGPT in this particular test. And we've been, if you follow the news, there's been some recent attempts to do exactly that. So there is another area in which I think we can see more. There is an interesting question about the impact, about what does it mean in terms of, are we going back to Lord Palmerston or not? What I think it's interesting is that there is a lot of pressure to process a lot of data. These algorithms could actually do quite well, quite efficiently. But at the same time, once you do that and you start to rely on this data, that means, the human expertise that is necessary at the moment to produce this kind of text will become, to a certain extent, redundant. So to what extent we can talk then about an AI-driven diplomacy, not in the sense that we have, an AI entity doing all the diplomatic work, but in the same way that the phone shapes the way in which we talk, the way in which we see, the way in which we travel. The same way AI could actually shape a lot of the environment in which diplomats actually operate and try to engage. How this adaptation takes place, we know, for instance, from a book of Everett Rogers about how innovation disseminate, that in a sense, everything depends on different stages. The technology, in order to disseminate, to be adopted, by Ministry of Foreign Affairs, I don't expect uniform adoption exactly for this reason. Has to demonstrate a real advantage. The advantage that we see nowadays is mainly in the production of text of ChatGPT, right? Despite the problem with the hallucination that we discussed. But it may come a time when it's going to be more efficient in terms of informing decision-making real time, as I mentioned with the case that I highlighted in the chat room. There is also a second point that we have to talk, and I think, Dr. Manot hinted in that direction. It's about the compatibility of the values that this type of innovation, this type of technology, whether they are aligned with the organizational culture of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs or with the larger normative rules or ethics in a particular country, ethical consideration, privacy concerns. And we see that in Europe, for instance, even the definition of risk, of what is a risk of using AI, differ strongly, for instance, from their partners across the Atlantic. There is a question of complexity, to what extent those involved in using AI can actually work well and understand how to do it. This is not social media. With social media, you can very easily open a Twitter account or and operate, but this is a much more complicated. So complexity, and I think this is the advantage of ChatGPT comparing with previous version of AI, that it reduces the complexity and make it easier for many to use it. There is a question of trialability. Adoption means also starting with small projects. This is why I don't expect this kind of things, to be adopted uniformly across Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Where I see the low-hanging fruit, I see probably in public diplomacy, and maybe moving on from there, probably to some crisis communication and international negotiation, as long as the fifth dimension, observability, is going to be in which you see results that are better than the one that you probably do it, in a more analog fashion. So in a paper that we published recently, we've done also a special issue with a colleague of mine, Ilan Manor. We try to understand how this kind of diffusion may take place. We looked at the vertical and horizontal type of acceleration. Horizontal is how AI could move across different domains, starting from consular affairs, including also public diplomacy, including crisis communication, so expanding horizontally. And vertical is more about how profoundly the transformation is. Are you still keeping the human in the loop, or you rely more on AI type of vertical transformation? I think at the beginning we may see a lot of minimal adoption, test, trial and error type of thing, with AI probably used in public diplomacy, media relation, because this is where at the moment the relative advantage is. We can expect, nevertheless, some of them, and I can notice some impact of that as we move forward, probably in the crisis communication, and also, as people become more comfortable and trustful of this kind of tools, the transformation will become more profound. And ultimately, this is where I think, Palmerston may get it right, is to what extent this situation may lead to a more complex AI-driven diplomacy. And again, we see a little bit of signs in that direction, in which institutions don't necessarily rely on these third actors, but they develop their own capacity. UN, for instance, is developing its own UN GPT type of, so that to avoid certain problems that comes with the use of extensive. So the last comment that I want to make, where are the trends that we should look for in terms of influence? I think the role of emotions is important. At the moment we focus on text, but there is a lot of interest in emotional intelligence, how they recognize and respond to human emotions. This is very interesting and very impactful for negotiation if it happens. We have a number of companies, Affectiva, already trying to play with this. As we discussed, for instance, I noticed that the AI is taking notes of what we talk. It will be interesting also to what extent next year or 2 years also will do sentiment analysis of the entire conversation. And that I think is particularly useful in terms of the type of understanding of the environment in which you operate. Very useful for negotiation. There is a lot of interest in trying to go around, the black box paradox. This is particularly important, especially in crisis communications, because the point here is that when you have to take decisions, you have to make sure that you understand exactly how this logic of suggestions coming from AI has been arrived at. You cannot, especially in time of crisis, say, well, we need to push the button. And when asked, why did you push the button? Then you say, well, the machine told me to do so. This is not the type of explanation that is acceptable. And that's explainable AI. All the regulation in Europe is pointing at this one. Everything has to be done. And I think it goes in the same direction of responsible AI. A very interesting one as well that we need to keep an eye is autonomous learning, in which models AI adapt, and that's probably something interesting to look at, in which they can learn and adapt without human intervention. An example I have, think about, an embassy that operates in a particularly politically unstable zone. And then, based on the information that it collects from the social media and from other sources, it raises or lowers, for instance, automatically the security protocols for the embassy personnel. That type of automation, you can expand it in different ways, and to go into more direction of vertical acceleration based on the dimension that I mentioned before. So I'm going to stop here, but the conclusion is, are we closer to Palmerston? I think we are moving in that direction. So it'll be interesting in a sense, to see if we come back in 10 years, how things will have evolved, and whether this prediction that I'm making it's accurate. Actually, I asked AI to give me a picture of a digital diplomat in 2014. It gave me a picture of a human, but actually look like a robot. More like a cyborg type of, which was very a little bit scary. But I'll stop here and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Corneli, for the insights you've shared with us. And thank you as well for keeping time. So may I now welcome our last speaker on stage, Mr. Harada Takeo. Mr. Harada Takeo was born in Takamatsu, Japan in 1971. Takeo Harada joined the Japanese diplomatic service at 20 while still a junior at the University of Tokyo. He served as an attaché in Bonn, Germany, and studied political science at the Free University of Berlin and constitutional law at the University of Tübingen. After 12 years in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Harada founded the Institute of International Strategy and Information Analysis in Tokyo. He holds master's degrees in artificial intelligence, philosophy, and Kyoto studies. Harada is a prolific author and contributes to global issues through his roles in academia and as CEO of IISIA. Mr. Harada will talk about application of generative AI to drafting governmental answers in the National Diet of Japan at the second front for diplomacy. Mr. Harada Takeo, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ari. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this webinar regarding the relationship between generative AI and diplomacy. And having heard the speeches of our prominent colleagues, I have the impression that I could be the minority here because I'm rather reluctant to applying generative AI, particularly ChatGPT and LLM, large language model, and to some parts of the diplomacy, as I will propose here. But anyway, let's get started with my short self-introduction. As Ali introduced me very briefly beforehand, and I have the 12 years experience in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs as a career diplomat. And this is quite important for me and also for this presentation because I can check for Japanese diplomatic documents because of my own experience as a career diplomat. And later on, I will propose a system using LLM to make a draft of the governmental answers in the diet sessions in terms of the North Korean affairs and North Korean questions between certain periods. But anyway, I'm now visiting assistant professor at the University of Hiroshima, teaching entrepreneurship, and also I'm now researching this issue, AI and diplomacy, mainly, and I'm a member of the Japanese Society for Artificial Intelligence. Well, generative AI and diplomacy. As you know, generative AI can be used in various fields related to diplomacy. But when you talk about diplomacy means in this regard, maybe negotiations or international protocol and international agreement and so on, or a global conference. But diplomacy has a B side or a side B as such. Side B means all the agreements, all the products, all the documents diplomats made has to be accepted by the parliaments and in Japanese, the national diet. So the Japanese diplomats facing two fronts. One of them is vis-a-vis the international community or the global community as a whole, and another one is vis-a-vis the national front in the parliament. So the point is the work in terms of this side B it's not so often highlighted in the media and society, but it is, as I will go further later on, it's a big, huge burden to the Japanese diplomats. And in this context, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the government of Japan officially stated repeatedly it studies how to make use of AI and generative AI in Japanese diplomacy in general. And also, maybe you can see Mr. Sam Altman in this picture. He's sitting in the center of the conference of the Liberal Democratic Party of Japan. And as shown in this picture, prominent CEOs of United States AI firms have been lobbying the Japanese politics to make sales offensive to the government of Japan, so that they will accept products of the LLM or GPT or something like that in the governmental services. The question is now whether the application of GenAI in Japanese diplomacy can be effective enough to enhance efficiency of daily works in the realities of Japanese diplomatic service. And the background of this question is as follows. The biggest problem we Japanese have in the society is the accelerated declining population. And because of this trend in the population, the so-called best and brightest in the Japanese society do not want to fast to the Japanese bureaucracy or apply for the posts in Japanese bureaucracy, because the number of the Japanese bureaucracies are limited due to the related regulations. So that, but we Japanese encounter with various accelerating global issues such as climate change or some kind of pollutions or crisis management, Ukraine and Israel, Gaza Strip, and so on. So overtime work dominates in the Japanese bureaucracy, particularly in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Yes, in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Japan, we have another problem, time difference with other regions. So the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is indeed one of the most tough workplaces in this regard. And the preparation for sessions of national diet as one of the most significant reasons. This issue is the very one we cannot disregard, because as I said, in the side B of the Japanese diplomacy, all the Japanese diplomats have to take care of the, how can I say, take care of making consensus or agreement or acceptance in the national diet. It's really a tough job, and it takes a very, very long time. So the situation is currently much worsening because of the so-called superiority of politics vis-a-vis bureaucracy in the Japanese politics. And as I said, both globalization and the digitalization are forcing Japanese diplomats to work much harder than ever. Picking up my personal experience, when I was a career diplomat in 2005, I was in charge of DPRK issues. And every month I had to do overtime work, more than 250 hours. It's really unbelievable, but it's a reality in the Japanese diplomacy. And in the course of time, the Japanese politicians, particularly ministers related to this phenomena in their own ministries, become aware, and they slowly find out Messiah. That's GenAI, particularly large language model. For example, last year, Economic Minister, Mr. Nishimura, is shown in this picture, stated that he and his ministry would study how to make use of GenAI to reduce the overtime in the daily work. But the question is whether they could have succeeded already or not. I haven't heard any good news since this statement. So, in last May of this year, the annual meeting of the Japanese Society for Artificial Intelligence was held in Hamamatsu in Japan, and I made a proposal to how can I say to check out the efficiency of the system using LLM in terms of the making drafts of the governmental answers to the questions in the national diet of Japan. And this is a rough sketch of the system I proposed there. I used the retrieval augmented generation scheme in connection with ChatGPT and also LangChain. As you see, we Japanese have the governmental minutes of all the national data sessions can be used from the database of the national library. And I used this database with API integration. And I split all the documents of the governmental answers by specie, and then I will put them into the text token and text embedding either to vectorize all the documents and the texts and corpus. And then I made a database. Then I will connect it with the query, which is coming from the ChatGPT system. And then a retrieval of similar sentences works so that the answer will be put into the chat OpenAI prompt template and human message schemes. And then these GPT 3.5 turbo systems are making governmental answers as a draft of the governmental answers. So this is a rough sketch of the scheme of the system I made. And I did the experiment with system. I input all the texts of the DR question in that session to the system, and then compare the answer of GenAI. Actually, all the answers I made with system with the real answers in the session. And I evaluate the results or outcomes of this experiment with two methods. One of them is mechanical evaluation with BERT score. And another one is quite important because, as I said, I was actually a career diplomat of Japanese diplomacy, and I was in charge of the DPRK issues. And I personally drafted all the governmental answers of the foreign ministers in terms of the DPR questions from 2003 and 2005. So I am capable of doing human evaluation based on my own diplomatic experience as chief desk officer for DPRK affairs. So based on these types of evaluations, I have picked up the following results of my experience. One of them is the BAT scores of these answers drafted by the systems remains below 2.7. That is good enough. That is far from the correct answers to be made by the human workforces in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And another point is there are two types of the government answers in the national diet. One of them is political answers, which only ministers may give, are fundamentally excluded in drafting by this system because they are not copies of the previous answers. As I said, as you know, the question of LLM is, it's, I can say, it is limited to the interpolation of data. So LLM can basically make copies of the previous governmental answers, but they cannot politically answer to the new questions. That's the point. And the third result of my experiment is regarding hallucinations. Various hallucinations in governmental answers, partly to crucial questions in the detail of difficulties in relationship, for example, between Japan and the BLK, of which I took the data or the corpus from the National Database, National Library Database. For example, in 2005, the government of Japan pursued a very complicated diplomacy vis-a-vis DPRK based on both pressure and dialogue. But when I made this system draft the answer, the system made answer which refers only to pressure. This could be disastrous in the real world of the Japanese diplomacy at that time. Well, my impression is the more GenAI is utilized in the preparation for that session in MOFA of Japan, the more burdens are given to particularly middle-aged officers who can both check and deliver the answers. That means, well, young officers of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs tend to use GenAI, particularly LLM, or the system I now proposed to make a draft of the government answers. But they are not correct enough. So that their elder colleagues who have sufficient experiences and knowledges on various diplomatic issues have to check all these drafts made by LLM and GenAI, in short. So I don't know whether this will make a great contribution to, how can I say, to enhance efficiency in the bureaucracy, particularly in the Japanese diplomacy at this juncture. Well, you may say fine-tuning and the prompt engineering still remain to make the situation better. Well, they could, but the hallucination issue still remains. So I'm still doubtful whether they do make the situation better. Well, my conclusion is, well, I'm terribly afraid to be minority here, but generative AI, particularly LLM, can be used to certain extent in the diplomacy, but whether they could make a sufficient efficiency in the diplomacy as a whole or not, I cannot answer at this juncture. Well, that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, CEO Harada, for the insightful presentation and for the solid experience that you have shared with us here. And we have very few questions from the participants. Some of them, they have been addressed by our speakers, but we have this one question that I guess Dr. Corneli can respond to it. And these questions come from the participant. It says, could we now start speaking, at least at that point, about the risk of one's state diplomatic approach dominating because of the AI product market domination? Dr. Corneli, could you please respond to this from our participant? Thank you.
I think, as Dr. Harada pointed out, we are not there yet. Remains to be seen whether the capacity will be developed safely to be used for AI to be used in a very confident manner to get a competitive advantage. But I know that work is being done. by Ministry of Foreign Affairs to use, for instance, this kind of tools in the context of international negotiations, with mixed results so far. But it's just, I think, we'll have to wait and see. Where is the problem? The problem is once you have this kind of tool that can actually disclose to you in real time certain things about the other side, about what extent, what are the strong points, what are the weak points, to what extent that kind of position is sustainable back home or has popular support, because we talk about the two-level game of Robert Putnam international negotiation, especially in democratic states. Then we can see how this kind of tool can give you a competitive advantage. And that will create a problem. To what extent, if I know that Dr. Harada has a tool that is very efficient in negotiation, do I want to enter negotiation with him knowing that I don't have one? How is that going to be an impact? Because knowing that he has a tool, then I know that I'm going to lose. I might refrain from doing this. So there will be some interesting questions about how the integration of this kind of tool in diplomatic activity could maximize divides that already exist or can be used to minimize divides. In my comment online in the chat room, I also mentioned that if used responsible, this could be also be an aid for multilateral negotiation in the same way that we do now. In multilateral negotiation, we can follow more simply what is happening to summarize positions, and that's useful, right? In terms of consolidating positions, building, support for certain type of points. So the devil is, as they say, in the details. How it's going to be used and how efficient that kind of tool will be.
Thank you, Dr. Corneli. We have one follow-up question following the presentation of CEO Harada. We have a question from Alice, and this says, how do we limit duplication of the same answers for almost similar questions but different scenarios? CEO Harada, can you respond to that, please?
Well, that is a very good question. As I said, because of the interpretation of the data in the artificial intelligence, we cannot exclude that all the same answers will be made to the almost same questions. But the point is, I can say, particularly in terms of the I can say debates in the national session in Japan or in any other states, I can say the way how to express the question is sometimes very, I can say, very various and various, very, I can say, too much, so that I can say that the answer can be also very politically. For example, when the I can say opposition party actually asks the ministers to answer the questions, the questions, the answers of the ministers could be also expressed very harshly, and vice versa. So, the nuance the LLM can make could also make a little bit of contribution to, how can I say, to brush up the drafts in such a situations. And at this stage, I will pick up what Dr. Bijura shortly said, that I can say, in terms of the negotiation, diplomatic negotiation, ChatGPT, or I can say a chatbot system based on the LLM could be very effective because, for example, to train young diplomats, they could be very cost effective when young diplomats could train by themselves with LLM-based chatbot system in terms of the, how can I say, how to negotiate diplomatically and also politically as well.
Thank you, CEO. Because we are running out of time, I'll pick up only one question, and this will be responded by Dr. Munira Bano. And the question says, how can diplomacy remain in public domain instead of being privatized by big tech companies? Dr. Munira, please.
So I think to me, currently coming from a software engineering background, what I can see is that there is a lot of these capitalist market competition where the companies who want to use these tools and there are software solutions to make the profitability and they dominate the surface. The way they operate and the resources take, me coming from a government organization where we want to take the risk-based approach towards developing the solutions and trying to make them go through the proper research processes, that takes longer. And a lot of time the companies, they're out there, they quickly want to market the solution. So how quickly I think the governments can come up with their own solution at some time, at least in the part of the data ownership and sovereignty. That's the first challenge that I do mention. It will all depend on the intention and available resources to compete with the giant tech companies, that how much efforts they put and what kind of infrastructure they can put around the countries rather than just being under one government. So there is not an easy answer to that question, but because there are quite a number of interconnected factors here.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Munira. We would love to extend this discussion, but time is against us. So thank you all for joining us today and for your active participation. We hope you found the discussions insightful and thought-provoking. A special thanks to our speakers for their enlightening talks on the role of generative AI in global diplomatic practices, the potential impact of ChatGPT on diplomacy, and the application of generative AI in governmental processes. We look forward to continuing these important conversations and exploring the future of AI in diplomacy together. Thank you very much. Special thanks to the IISIA, the UNU Macau, and to you all participants for joining us. And we hope we shall meet in our next editions of these generative AI webinars. Thank you so much, and have a nice day.